South Florida has known all about Barkov County, but with Alexander Barkov bringing the cup back to Tampere, Finland, it has been transformed into Barkov City.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, August 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at WonderMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. Sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again to discuss the Summer of Champions for the Florida Panthers. Yes, it still feels great to say that even after a month after they have won the Stanley Cup. So, and the tour of the Stanley Cup continues for the Panthers right now as it is overseas out in Europe for the celebration. And for the last few days, the captain got his chance at the cup, and now it's made its way to Sweden. But we'll park that part of it, and the Sweden part of it. We will talk about that next week on the show. But today we are going to discuss Barkov's day with the cup on. But it is also, we are discussing this on a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Nich Fairbanks is back here to discuss everything and more. We're going to discuss Barkov's day with the cup, breaking down the two biggest trades in Florida Panthers history, and then the time that the Florida Panthers attempted to draft Alexander Ovechkin, who's about to break the goal scoring record all-time in the NHL, maybe next season or the season after. So, Nich, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me back, and I can't wait to visit that destination that is now known as Barkov City. We've been lucky enough to be in Barkov County here for the last decade. Why not go visit the actual epicenter of where everything began?
Yeah, it's funny because the way I opened the show talking about how Tampere, Finland has been transformed into Barkov County, but it's not transformed just because Aleksander Barkov won the Stanley Cup and went over there because of his history there, owning the team, playing for them, growing up with them. Obviously, his dad is involved too with the franchise and then coming over here. But it's funny because we've also talked about just how much superstardom Barkov does have over there in Finland. But obviously, it's been showcased even more with winning the cup. But for him, his day with the cup, just going around and first of all, one of the first images we saw was the pro skater Marcus Väinö, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, doing tricks over the cup. And the Panthers posted a photo of it, of an album cover. And the first thing I thought of was the parental advisory logo that you used to see at Barnes & Noble. So it's funny because it's been a long time since I've been inside of Barnes & Noble to get music, with now how technology has evolutionized too. So it brings me back to those days. So pretty awesome scene where you see Barkov on one knee along with the keeper of the cup.
So it took me back to maybe late 90s, early 2000s, and a game called Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Yep. You have to think now, if they come out with another version, that there is going to be a trick, or there is going to be a small little part of the game where somebody does do some kind of trick over the Stanley Cup, because I've never seen it before. And I forget the gentleman's name who actually guards the cup.
Phil Pritchard. You saw him down on one knee, and you just see, like, I hope this doesn't go badly. I hope this guy actually makes the jump over it. I can only imagine what he goes through day in and day out with the cup, just making sure that it's in safe, good keeping and nothing happens to it. But no, just a very unique kind of way of, like, showcasing talent over in Finland. Yeah, no doubt. And just looking up the soundtrack right now for Tony Hawk Pro Skater, I just remember being able to just go through and breaking a glass in N64. Obviously, I tweeted about this. Superman by Goldfinger is that one song that for me personally sticks from that game that I at least play once in a while here. But mentioned that Barkov took it to an amusement park to share with the kids, and shouldn't be surprised knowing of the charity work that he does with Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital, obviously having a suite for the game, but also the celebration continued in Nokia Arena, where the Panthers will play their Global Series game. Earlier, he also brought it to the Finnish Hall of Fame, which is in Tampere. But with that celebration with the cup in Nokia Arena, you had obviously the guys of Nico Mikkola, Anton Lundell, Luosterainen there already, but then former teammates there, and Jussi Jokinen, Markus Nutivaara, Sean Bergenheim, and NHL journeyman Ville Nieminen, and also congratulatory videos of Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, obviously a guy who he's done charity work with in golf, in Patrick Laine over in Finland, and Nico Rantanen too there. So it just goes to show how special just Barkov has been in the game of hockey, and just over there in Finland, and showcased even more and more, like we mentioned earlier in the segment.
It's great to not only get congratulations and have like your group of, teammates, but also friends kind of help you out, in your home country. And I would say basically your home city, to kind of help bring that all together. But I think it sends a message from Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky, to send a message saying, congratulations. It's one thing that Gretzky's done his whole career is help grow the game. And he is probably the major reason why that there is hockey in the southern region of the United States. So it's just, again, he's continuing to be that force that keeps pushing the game farther and farther. Not saying that the NHL is ever going to go into Europe. I mean, I think we're a long ways from that, but it's really good to see that the community kind of surrounding Barkov and helping him celebrate.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the whole Wayne Gretzky trade to LA back in 1988, which you think of the results after that with Tampa, Florida, Anaheim getting some teams too. Then eventually the Minnesota North Stars moving south too, to Dallas too, and everything. So big. The fact that it's coming from him, and obviously the comment that we heard him make during the Stanley Cup final, where best defensive player since Brian Trottier too. So big deal that Wayne Gretzky is giving Barkov his flowers there for his time in of winning the cup and just being an ambassador of the game. And also Barkov capped off the night with the cup in a sauna too. It's funny because I'm not going to pretend I know how the science works of the cup in a sauna, but I remember just hearing when Matthew Tkachuk dumped the cup into the ocean. I'm thinking, okay, I raised an eyebrow a little bit when I saw the cup in a sauna, and then using it to dump the water to for the sauna too. So that was another cool image that we saw from his day with the cup.
Yeah, definitely some different I don't want to say atmospheres, but different ways the cup's been used this offseason. You have Tkachuk falling in the ocean with it, which is probably not the best idea.
Brady's idea, by the way.
Oh boy. Well, maybe he won't be coming to Florida anytime soon then. But anyways, no, just very interesting to see how players want to celebrate with it. I mean, you have people eating cereal out of it, alcohol, obviously, and then, just doing like small little different things with it. What's important to the players, you get to see a little bit more of their personality. And it seems like Barkov is somebody who's really chilled, really laid back, and likes his relaxing time.
Oh, yeah. And with the sauna, just being able to release all of that too, and then getting that with the cup, and only the combination of that is I can only imagine how much of how relaxed everyone in that room definitely was for sure there. But like we said earlier in the segment, the cup is currently in Sweden, where OEL already had his day with the cup. Forsling is currently with the cup right now, right before it goes back to Finland for Anton Lundell's day with the cup. We will discuss that more next week here on the show. But coming up in the next segment, we're going to discuss break down the two biggest trades in Florida Panthers history. Is one better than the other? Is one more impactful? For that, we are going to discuss if one trade possibly didn't happen, does it lead to another? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors and passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, and exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And once again, I'd like to thank you guys all for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So, by the way, I do want to congratulate Uvis Balinskis on getting married this past weekend, and he also celebrated a birthday too. So happy birthday to Uvis Balinskis too. So having the combination of a marriage and a birthday, who has it better than him? And also he's a Stanley Cup champion too. So let's not forget that when it comes to Uvis Balinskis. So, and also apologies in advance for my voice, as there's a few sniffles there, a little bit under the weather, but we are going to manage through this episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But once again, back here with Nich Fairbanks here on today's edition of the show. In this segment, we are going to discuss more about the two biggest trades in Florida Panthers history. Is there one that's better than the other? I know the ultimate goal of a franchise is to ultimately win the Stanley Cup too. But obviously with Roberto Luongo being part of the franchise, Matthew Tkachuk just getting traded a few years ago to the Florida Panthers, let's just have an open conversation about just the two biggest trades with the franchise. Obviously, Huberdeau, Weegar, Cole Schwindt, and a first-round pick go to Calgary in exchange for Matthew Tkachuk for the Panthers too, and a mid-round pick for that the Panthers got back in it. But the Panthers, when they traded for Roberto Luongo, got Olli Jokinen out of it in exchange for Mark Parrish and Oleg Faksha for the Panthers then. So for the Panthers, I think about the two stints with Roberto Luongo with him, and obviously the direction that the Islanders were going at the time. They drafted him 4th overall, then draft Rick DiPietro, which I believe the Islanders are still paying, if I'm not mistaken. Well, the New Jersey Devils are still paying Ilya Kovalchuk, I believe, too. But but for Luongo, I think about everything that he's gone through with the Panthers here, and through the horrible years of getting top picks. You think of obviously Stephen Weiss, Jay Bobinster, Nathan Horton, and obviously an ownership change in the middle of everything too, and right before the trade in 2006, but also with Matthew Tkachuk, immediately a Stanley Cup final appearance and an actual championship. But I also think about when Roberto Luongo came back, the amount of excitement there was for him, and I think of all the different guys that the Panthers tried bringing here that have had pretty good resumes. I think of Jose Theodore, who's won a Hart, but when he was here, was 35 years old. Mike Vernon had plenty of playoff experience, 36 years old. Tim Thomas was a Stanley Cup champion, Conn Smythe winner too for him. But I also think about another thing for Lou, and just the fact that he was able to he convinced the management to draft someone like Devin Levi, and that was an asset used to trade for Sam Reinhart, which obviously that paid off. Stanley Cup champion, 8-year extension too, and all that, and big part of the goalie excellence department too. So it feels like that without that, it doesn't lead to other things for the Panthers too. But with Matthew Tkachuk, I mean, you might be I'm very sure that the Panthers would still be without one if the trade doesn't happen. So I think I'm walking myself into the bigger trade is still Matthew Tkachuk for the franchise.
So for the franchise and what it meant, yeah, I would definitely say so. But you need to look at also the two different trades that happened with Luongo, or I should say three different trades with Luongo and the Panthers. Number one, when he was acquired with Olli Jokinen, there's a reason why Mike Milbury's not near a management position after that. The fact that they got Parrish and Kavasha for Lou, Oli, it just, you wonder what he was thinking. I understand at the time you wanted a proven goal scorer and that Jokinen was unproven and Luongo was young and raw and everything, but it just sends to me the wrong message that you're not willing to be patient and allow players to grow, because Islanders could have been a pretty good team, without Parrish or Kavasha if they would have kept Oli and developed him and also Luongo. Then you fast forward to Florida having Luongo and then trading him. He never wanted to leave. It just came down to the negotiations between Luongo and Mike Keenan, unfortunately, and then management getting in there saying, we don't want to budge on this. And, that rest is history. So Lou never wanted to leave. And then you had the third one where the team was trying to find stability in the net that, they tried, as you said, to piece together over the years. And unfortunately, you had like Tim Thomas that came in. He played well that season. We didn't mention Eddie Belfour that one season. He was magnificent. You have Jose Theodore, but you just never had that number one guy that came in and took over the job. And as soon as Lou came in, you knew that was going to be solidified for the next couple of seasons. Then you could then develop the team in other ways and start building from that out from there. So all three trades did definitely impact the franchise. The first one was very positive. The second one just told me like, hey, ownership doesn't want to pay. Let's be honest, they didn't want to take on a contract like that, which sent the wrong message to fans and also the team. And then the third one, bringing Lou back, was probably the start of, hey, we need to take this seriously. We need to start building this thing up, and we're here for real.
Yeah, right before Lou got traded, he was already a top three in the Vezina for him. Obviously, the 900 plus shots more than the next the next most. I remember that was a big conversation during that time. Ed Belfour, you mentioned Ed Belfour playing 58 games shortly after Luongo left, and then after that, you're coming off the Vokun era for Panthers with Peter DeBoer. It feels like it was wasted that era of
he was so good.
Panthers hockey too. So for him, so for Luongo, I mean, you think about the energy that was when coming back and then finally getting a playoff appearance for them too, and how much that meant for him. And like Lou was the least of the Panthers' problems during that 16 postseason run where they lost in 6 games eventually to the Islanders. So that's another thing. And also what the Panthers went through with you mentioned Mike Keenan not wanting to match the offer. I mean, when you're thinking about mix of coach back to GM back to coach and everything with how you don't see that much these days in the NHL too. So you're thinking about just all the turmoil, and then also off the ice, meeting his lovely wife in the area too, and then growing up there, and then having to move cross country to Vancouver, and then obviously we discuss hockey is more is the ultimate team sport, how you need so many surrounding pieces around a guy too. So that's another thing for Luongo of how much that trade originally impacted the Panthers. Because if he was just traded in 2014, never dealt with that era, we wouldn't have the connection we have with him. He would not be banging the drum. He would not have banged the drum for Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Like, that's just the truth for that.
No, and not to bring up I don't want to call it a sore subject, but a sad subject. But you don't get that impassioned speech after February Stoneman Douglas massacre.
Yeah,
that really kind of cemented the community and this Florida Panthers organization that they're behind everybody, and how much that impacted him and his kids. So the fact that there was so much turmoil with Lou leaving, and then this Grace coming back, as hard as it is, it almost seems like it's perfect the way that it had to be. Unfortunately, as much as it hurt, this is the way it had to be, and it ended with him lifting a cup as a member of the management team. So they say things are bittersweet, but you know what? It happened for a reason.
Yeah, and Luongo, being a native, not native, a resident of
Yeah.
Parkland, too, that is definitely big into him having that speech in the first place, too. And he said, I want to spend the rest of my life in Parkland. So very, very powerful message. And hey, that doesn't happen, like you said, without that original trade in the early 2000s, too. You have one more thing?
One more thing. The fact that we're talking about all this just with how much of an impact Lou has had just because of the trades and what he's done for the community, I think it speaks volumes of like how big of an influence he's been since his trades. Now, Matthew Tkachuk has definitely changed how this franchise operates and how it is, and it brought us a championship. But let's see how it is in the next decade and see how much of an impact he's had and see where hockey is in South Florida, after a time period like that. Because, hey, we might win, a couple, more games and stuff like that, but is there going to be another cup, and is hockey going to then still be a hotbed? So just something to look forward to.
Yeah, with the marketability of Tkachuk, which Territory Talk also mentioned one more time about Pat McAfee and just being on display too. It's definitely for him. He's really more of a face in the NHL. And hey, it helps that a U.S. team with with an American player, that's definitely big for him. So the trade for Roberto Luongo was a foundation, while the trade for Matthew Tkachuk was the one that crossed the finish line. And Luongo went through, like we said, he went through hell, and especially during one time of the Florida Panthers history where they tried to draft Alexander Ovechkin. And that will be a great way to segue into segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about that story. And we're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But the playoffs have been over for a few weeks, over a month now, and we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. And all we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. And once again, I'd like to thank you guys all for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, another Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So, like we mentioned, Nick, the Luongo went through a lot of losing, and there's a big part of the history of the Florida Panthers that obviously we spoke about the recent winning for the Panthers, but also a lot of losing. And this is a good opportunity for us to do a deeper dive into the history of the Panthers here. And really for the year that the Panthers tried to draft Alexander Ovechkin in the draft a year earlier than expected too. And with a leap year coming in the very next year, which if you guys want to keep track of leap years, the best way to track leap years, it's always in the same year as an election year too. So that's the best way, just like this year for this year. But there were the February 29th of that time came in the year after. So the Panthers were trying to do a loophole of moving up a date for the draft for as far as Alexander Ovechkin being draft eligible, because there's a cutoff. His birthday was a few days right before the cutoff. Just like how in Florida schools, I believe the cutoff is September 1st to be in a certain grade too here. But at the time, Rick Dudley was the one who was presenting everything, but mostly influenced by the owner at the time, Alan Cohen. who was trying to draft Alexander Ovechkin, really a year earlier, and trying to argue that leap year loophole, trying to and for the Panthers there, NHL originally said no, and Rick Dudley had to do a presentation, and the NHL gave him 5 minutes to present it. Rejected, and then Alan Cohen wanted him to go back again to make another pitch to draft him. And then the NHL was afraid that they were going to try to pick that with the number 1 overall pick when they had that year, which they eventually traded. That was the Marc-Andre Fleury draft, where they drafted Nathan Horton that year. So there was also a threat to forfeit that pick too. Mm-hmm. A first round top 3 pick, possibly forfeited for the Panthers in that time. And the Panthers obviously didn't end up doing that, but they went back for more. It seemed as if the front office was moving on, and there's still chatter in the later rounds. And then Alan Cohen pulled back, but Mike Keenan was now starting to get involved with it because he had a very strong relationship with Cohen at the time. So they tried doing it in the 9th round again, and the NHL shut them down and had a talk with them, and they actually had to take a timeout right before their pick too. So and the thing is, the Panthers wanted to make it known in the open that this was what they're trying to do. It wasn't a secret too. That's the craziest part about this when you look back at this story.
So it's probably one of the craziest stories, and I think it just shows like where ownership and management was at that time, unfortunately. And who's not gonna say, yeah, let's go try to draft Ovechkin? I mean, look at where he is now and what he would have done for this organization had the league allowed it to happen. But obviously the league had different rules, and he didn't really fit the criteria, although Dudley and Cohen actually did pitch, a good idea. But taking the tinfoil hat off there, it just just a very weird time. That's really all I'll say about it, and it's quite fun to think about. But I don't know if you guys have seen on the internet, but the Washington Capitals have already put out a presser saying that the Panthers are not allowed to try and draft Sergei Ovechkin at next year's draft, even though he's like 9 or 10 years old right now or something like that, but to not even try it. But just a little fun. But yeah, I mean, thinking if Ovechkin would have been on the Panthers, I think that would have accelerated a lot. I don't think Luongo would have gone anywhere. Probably would have had a little bit more success. And I actually wonder what he would have been like under Mike Keenan, just to be honest.
Yeah, and obviously with Mike Keenan's history, taking the New York Rangers job shortly after Roger Nielsen was out and came to Florida. It's so crazy. One guy who formerly coached the Rangers came down, and then another one years later for the Panthers too. So a lot of shuffling in the coaching realm, obviously, which recycling coaches isn't new in NHL history too. But also for that year. For when they actually after the timeout, which the NHL talked to the Panthers, they went back to the table and had their pick too, and actually drafted the pick, and it happened to be Tanner Glass for the Panthers, and then Rick Dudley, obviously just doing what he's told, walks out and doesn't want to deal with the media, because obviously you're kind of like at that point you're kind of like a punching bag for the organization when you're just instructed to try to do this. Obviously you're trying. Cohen only owned the organization, owned the franchise for 2 years for him, so you were trying to make an impact with a franchise that wasn't necessarily in the best financial stability too, neither. So you're trying to, and this is the thing, Ovi was coming off a down year too, going into that draft. So there, Alan Cohen trying to say, okay, he can bounce back here, and also the time that would happen after with a lockout, all of the amount of players who are playing internationally too. The amount of time Ovechkin has missed due to lockouts, he would have broken the goal scoring record by now because his durability, it's been good throughout his career.
It definitely has. And one question I do have based on what you just said is if Florida does, in fact, be successful in drafting him, do you think he's even close to the goal scoring, record?
Is he even with the team?
Well, no. Personally, no. No.
Did he get traded?
I think no on both accounts, to be honest. I don't think he would have had the supporting cast. He would have been part of the Sunshine Express line. There's no David Booth there. Probably would have been Ovechkin, which would have been fun to see. But I don't think he'd be anywhere near. And I think he would have booked it after probably after his second contract.
Yeah, and just when you look at the poor endings for the Panthers with trading Nathan Horton, Jay Bouwmeester leaving free agency to Calgary later on too, it's just when there's so much instability, you just at a certain point you just want to win after a while. But it's funny because that's not even the craziest draft story that we've had in the history of this league. In 83, the St. Louis Blues did not participate in the draft at all because they were rejected the sale of the team. So almost 20 years after they first came into the league with the expansion, they skipped the draft that had Steve Yzerman, Pat LaFontaine, Cam Neely, and Dominic Hasek in it too. So you're thinking about opportunity to get at least one of those players. Ouch. And also, this one's actually really hilarious too. The Buffalo Sabres drafted a guy who didn't even exist in 74, Taro Sugimoto. And if you go to Buffalo, you'll see jerseys of that name and number 74 on the back, just as a joke too. So it was more of a protest of how the NHL was conducting their draft with how long it was taking. Obviously more rounds. There were more rounds prior to the 04-05 lockout too. So all crazy draft stories that we've that have happened in the history of the league. And this one for the Panthers, trying to draft Ovechkin isn't even the craziest. So what do you think when you hear those?
Not surprised by the Blues because they made the playoffs for quite a long time, but they had to piece it together. So I wonder if that draft really set them back. The Buffalo Sabres pick, man, that is just wild. Never heard of that before, but now that makes me want to go get an Ovechkin Panthers jersey because you know what? We tried. But it just goes to show that teams will try to basically stick to their point and say, hey, listen, this is not fair, or this is our argument, and the fact that you're not taking it seriously, we're going to cut off our nose to spite our face to make a point. And sometimes you need to do that. And, in the sport that is competitive and, it's anybody's year, basically, you have to take risks and you have to try to push the game in your favor every season.
Yeah, always trying to look at advantages. I mean, there's that old saying, at least for the Panthers, trying to draft Ovechkin. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. Too. I mean, can't
hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah, so that's just what franchises try to do to gain any advantage. And we're talking about legacies here of just trying to win and being forever etched. It took the Panthers a long time. It was 20 years after the fact, but hey, what matters is that we got here for this franchise, and that's really ultimately what matters. And also, Ovi spoke about how impressive it was for him too. And question, was that a whole Capitals saying they can't draft Sergei Ovechkin? That was during the All-Star game last year, right? During the skills. I believe so. I
believe so. Yeah, because he was definitely out on the ice and everything, and they just said no. No, you guys can't draft him.
Yep, and where he teamed up with Crosby on that skills challenge, and I remember after he's like, "Oh, after the career's over, I'll buy Sid a beer." But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on another successful Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Thanks for having me on again. Number one, I hope you're going to be feeling better. Hope you get the rest that you need and everything. I know what it's like. Trust me. But everybody, you guys can follow me on X at Prudentious0, and looking forward to seeing what might happen over the next week. You know, you were getting a week closer to training camp, and you know, you might have some PTOs signed. We don't know yet, so it'll be something to look forward to.
Maybe we will see, and we'll be here definitely for it if those do happen. But Nick, thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you next week.
See you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.